What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a breakdown, reaction, and review of the pilot episode of HBO's Batman spin-off miniseries, The Penguin. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if for some reason you haven't gotten around to watching this episode yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time, let's get into it. The Penguin is an American-made television miniseries created by Lauren LaFranc for HBO. Based on the DC Comics character The Penguin, it's a spin-off from the film The Batman that explores the Penguin's rise to power in Gotham City's criminal underworld. LaFranc serves as the showrunner of the series, which is produced by DC Studios in association with Warner Brothers Television. Now, Colin Farrell stars as the Penguin, reprising his role from The Batman alongside Kristen Milioti, Renzi Feliz, Deidre O'Connell, Clancy Brown, Carmen Ejogo, Michael Zegan, Berto Colon, James Madio, Joshua Bitton, David H. Holmes, Daniel J. Watts, Ben Cook, Jamie Lawson, Michael Kelly, and Mark Strong. Now, development was underway for the show by September of 2021, and HBO Max ordered it in March of 2022 after The Batman was released. The film's director, Matt Reeves, supervised the writing and was involved in hiring the creative team. Now, filming for the show began in March of 2023 in New York, but was halted in June by the 2023 Hollywood labor disputes. Production resumed in late November and concluded in February of 2024. The series moved from HBO Max's successor Max to HBO in July of 2024, and Craig Zobel directed the first 3 episodes of the show. Now, The Penguin premiered in the United States on HBO on September 19th of this year and is set to run for 8 episodes until November 10th. And at the time of the making of this video, the series has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the show's popcorn meter currently at 89%. It has a Metascore of 72 on Metacritic based on 39 critic reviews, with a user score of 7.8 based on 62 user ratings. And finally, it has an 8.8 out of 10 on IMDb with almost 2,500 ratings. So look, guys, I'm going to start this by admitting to you that The Batman was not my favorite Batman movie. That was The Dark Knight Rises. In fact, The Batman was not my second favorite Batman movie. That was The Dark Knight. And, it's mostly because of how long this movie was. I thought it was about 30 minutes longer than it needed to be. I also didn't like Robert Pattinson as Batman. Not that he should care. But, Christian Bale is the best Batman, in my opinion. To me, it's not debatable. I also didn't love Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. It's not that she did a horrible job, but for me, the best Catwoman is Anne Hathaway, so there's that. But Zoe Kravitz kind of reminded me of Halle Berry's Catwoman, and we all know how the Catwoman movie turned out, so I'll just leave that there. But, if I had to say, the Batman, I would put that third on the list behind, like I said, The Dark Knight Rises and then The Dark Knight. I think the Batman would be third. But I knew that The Penguin was meant to be a spinoff of The Batman, so I was a bit apprehensive until I heard that Colin Farrell was indeed coming back to play Oswald Cobblepot, or Oz as they refer to him in this series. And that kind of perked me up a bit as the series was concerned. It gave me some hope. So I decided to watch this pilot with an open mind, hoping to like it. Because 1, I'm a Colin Farrell fan, if I'm being honest. And 2, we have so few television shows produced nowadays that are actually good. And I just think because Hollywood just doesn't give a shit anymore. Above all that, HBO just got done with an absolute stinker of a season 2 with House of the Dragon. And so I wasn't sure I could take another major letdown without canceling my HBO subscription. Because, I have HBO on cable and, Max. So HBO's getting a lot of my money on a monthly basis. And so I'm just like, if they just keep on making nonsense, I'm just going to have to go ahead and cancel the subscription. It just costs too much. But I thought about it for a while, and I decided to choose this series as the one that I would break down because I feel like I have a feeling that I can trust the writers to produce quality work. And there are only 8 episodes total in the series. So even if I happen to be wrong about that, this will be over in 8 weeks' time. So here we go. Fingers crossed, right? We're going to try this breakdown thing again. If you've been subscribed to my channel for a while, you know that I broke down House of the Dragon and Mayor of Kingstown. Both of the shows immensely let me down where the writing was concerned. But we're going to try this again. I appreciate you guys for being here with me on this. And hopefully, I won't want to gouge my own eyes out about halfway through this process. So the pilot episode starts with Oswald Cobblepot, or Oz, standing at the large window overlooking Gotham City in Carmine Falcone's lounge. And it's a nice shot, but soon after it's intercut by a news report about a series of explosions along the seawall and the Batman vigilante atop Gotham Square Garden trying to help injured victims from said explosions. A week later, in the timeline, another news report blames the explosions on the Riddler, and it is said that the wealthy of Gotham City have been mostly spared by the incident, but the poorest areas of the city were hit the hardest, especially Crown Point. Another report states that looting and rioting had become the norm, combined with the scarcity of illicit drugs and gang violence, that the city has reached a boiling point. And then yet another report talks about how the murder of crime boss Carmine Falcone outside the Iceberg Lounge, get it, has complicated efforts to restore order in the city, creating a power vacuum in Gotham's underworld, and that there are rumors that Alberto Falcone, Carmine's son, is set to take his father's place as head of the family, despite his public struggles with alcohol. And that after the shakeup in leadership, insiders worry about their future inside the Falcone organization and wonder what will become of Gotham's most notorious family. So look, this was all a data dump. Designed to both set the stage for the pilot episode and tie this series to the Batman movie. As you may remember, the flooding of Gotham took place in that film in the third act, and this is a spinoff of that film, so there you go. It was cleverly done for the most part, but the writers flew a little too close to the sun towards the end of the dialogue, claiming that people inside the Falcone organization wondered about their place in it, as if criminals would go sit down with news reporters and talk about the ins and outs of their criminal organization. The last several lines of the voiceover that were written specifically for the sake of dramatically taking us to the cut to black at the end of the scene and jumpstarting the story. Nothing more, nothing less. But make no mistake about it, the dialogue here at the end doesn't make narrative sense at all. And, but I understand why they did it. I don't know what else they could have done. I don't know what else I would have done. But yeah, from a narrative perspective, what the news reporters were saying just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But I get it. It's the fastest way to get us into the story. And so, there are time constraints with these kind of things, even though it seems like there's not anymore because, TV episodes now are like an hour and 15 minutes, like they're basically mini movies. But I'm not going to eat the writer's lunch for this. This is kind of one of those things where you just kind of go, we did what we had to do. So from there, we see Gotham City at night and a purple car pulling up to the Iceberg Lounge. And here we're properly introduced in the series to Oswald Cobblepot, or Oz Cobb, as he's called throughout this episode and likely throughout the series. Anyway, he exits the vehicle and he takes a sledgehammer out of the trunk. And he waddles into the dilapidated building, the Iceberg Lounge. He exits the elevator into the office or lounge space that Carmine used to use or was using in the film The Batman. And he proceeds to use the hammer to open a secret compartment of some kind, removing a folder with apparently damning information about someone named Haiti and some incriminating photos of what turns out to be Johnny Vitti, a higher up member of the Carmine Falcone family. So, we see that. Now, as he gathers the information along with some jewelry that's in the space, he is set upon by Alberto, who holds him at gunpoint. And he tells him that he came to get the jewels for him before the other guys could take them for themselves. He congratulates Alberto on his new position while offering his condolences for the death of his father. Now, Alberto doesn't seem to buy Oz's explanation about why he's there, telling Oz that his father has been dead a week. And again, this is the writer setting the story's timeline. So Oz immediately offers Alberto drugs, no doubt knowing his struggles with drugs and alcohol. Now, Alberto tells Oz that he's not there for a hit. He explains to Oz that, everybody's looking at him now and that he has a deal going, so he needs to keep his head on straight. Now, Oz tells him that he understands the pressure that he's under, but that he's freaking Alberto Francone. He applauds Alberto staying off the drugs, and then he offers him a drink instead, which Alberto, being an alkie, accepts. And we next find the pair drinking and talking. Oz asks Alberto about the new deal he was talking about. Alberto tells him that he plans to revolutionize the drug game. Remember that sentence, revolutionize the drug game. Well, half a sentence. He gives him a necklace from the stash he was about to steal before telling Oz to keep quiet about his plans. He also tells Oz that his father knew that he was skimming, but that it wasn't enough for him to mind because he knew how it made him feel and that it was good for business. Alberto then holds up his pinky finger with a ring on it that his father apparently took from Salvatore Maroni as a trophy. He tells him that the ring is power before asking if he wants to try it on. Now, Oz declines, and Alberto asks Oz if he thinks he can be as good as his father was. And again, Oz moves to patronize him before telling him a story about a man named Rex Calabrese, a gangster he met when he was a kid, and that he was a big deal in his neighborhood because he seemed to care about people and he helped them. But that one day he had a heart attack and died, still holding a cigar. Remember that. But the people in the neighborhood threw a parade for him, and he asked Alberto if he can imagine being remembered like that. Now, Alberto seems to take offense to Oz's story, claiming that Oz seems to want him to be like some small-time asshole. He goes on to ask if that would make it easier for Oz to take what's his. He then asks Oz if that's what he wants, to be remembered fondly, before bursting into laughter and calling him pathetic. Now, he goes on to continue to antagonize Oz until finally Oz takes out his gun and he shoots him dead. And after the incident, Oz sits there and he laughs initially before taking time to think about what he's done. Then he curses loudly before we cut the title. Now, this scene is the writers letting us, the audience, see Oz and what he wants. Sure, we saw bits of Oz in The Batman, but The Batman was kind of focused on other things, so we only saw Oz kind of sparingly. So here we're going to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of Oswald Cobblepot, or Oz Cobb, as they call him in this series. We're going to get the chance to see kind of what he really wants, what makes him tick. And he seems to want to be remembered fondly above all else. You know, he kind of seems to believe in soft power, which can take a little longer to achieve, but I happen to think personally that people respect soft power more, which this is kind of interesting to me. It makes him a more personable gangster, one that people would choose to respect because they want to, not necessarily because they're deathly afraid of. And it'll be interesting to see him change from the version of himself that we saw in The Batman and at the beginning of this series to a much harder, less personable type, which is surely going to come about by series end. Anyway, after the shooting, we see Oz stuffing Alberto's body into a suit bag and carrying him out of the club. Now, once outside, he sees a group of kids trying to steal the rims off his purple Maserati. And, you know, the car kind of says to me that, you know, he's trying to project this image that may not necessarily be him. Because a purple Maserati, like, come on now. But most of the kids run away. But he catches one of them, Victor Aguilar. And he takes the kid's ID and he forces him to help move the body from the club to the trunk of the car, threatening the kid and his family if he doesn't do what he says. And, you know, after placing Alberto's body in the trunk of the car, he forces Victor to drive him somewhere as he goes through Alberto's phone. And that's how he finds the date of the shipment that Alberto was set to receive. You know, this, of course, is germane to the plan he was talking about. And, you know, sometimes, you know, as writers, you have to come up with ways in stories like this. You have to come up with ways for characters to find out information that are of the variety of show, not tell. And so I appreciated, you know, them kind of having Oz take the phone and kind of figuring out what Alberto was up to by looking at the phone and seeing it that way. Even though no words are spoken, we kind of get the point that, okay, this is how Oz knows kind of what's happening, the date of the shipment, so to speak. So while they're in the car, Oz takes out Victor's ID and he sees where he lives. He tells him that he's from the East Side too, just not Crown Point. You know, the tenement that was mentioned in the news story at the beginning of the episode that was destroyed. So, you know, we learned that maybe Victor has nowhere to go. That may be why he's even stealing the rims in the first place with his friends, just trying to figure out how to survive. And then he asks him if he's ever been to Buddy's on the corner. Now, Victor says he knows it, and Oz asks him if they still sell those slush puppies. Victor says he thinks so. Oz tells him that he and his brother used to go there every day in the summer when they were kids and mix the flavors. He asks Victor if he's ever done that. Victor says no, but then Victor says, but he'd like to, like in the future. And, this conversation is just us getting to know Oz a little more, just as we did in the conversation between he and Alberto. We now know that he's from the east side of town and that he has a brother, or at least he had one. And as far as Victor is concerned, in this conversation, he's just kind of low-key begging for his life here. Plain and simple. He just wants to make sure that Oz is not going to kill him once he's done with him. Which might sound benign, but I always tell you guys that writers don't write things for nothing. Or at least they shouldn't. So even that simple line of dialogue is leading somewhere to a plot point later in the episode. So remember I said that. But as Victor continues to drive through town, Oz tells him to turn left, and he parks in an area in what looks like the red light district of Gotham. And, he gets out of the car and follows Oz into an apartment building where he meets with a woman named Eve. She opens the door and she calls him, baby. So we can tell that these two kind of have some sort of ongoing situation. She then sees the kid and asks who he is, but Oz doesn't answer. He asks Eve if she's alone, and then he apologizes for getting in her business. And again, we can assume she's a pro. And he asks her for an alibi for the whole night. Now, she tells him that she can give him one for after 10, but not before. He peeks inside her apartment before agreeing to her terms. He then reaches into his pocket. He gives her some cash before telling her that he'll call her. And then the pair leave to go get something to eat. And, look, this scene is a pretty short one, but if we listen to the dialogue and we pay attention to Oz's demeanor here, we can make the assumption that Oz may even be in love with Eve, despite her occupation, and that we'll probably see this woman again in future episodes, especially as Oz continues to rise in the ranks of Gotham's criminal underworld and has maybe more to offer her. That she may be elevated because he gets elevated. And that's why I say I think, he may be in love with her, because it feels like the kind of thing where he's going to make his way up and he's going to kind of take her with him. And that will kind of be why she kind of sticks with him and sticks around. But that also makes me think that she might not be long for this world. But, we'll kind of see how that all goes, because, we can tell that Oz is about to embark on an interesting journey, but a dangerous one to be sure, especially for the people kind of around him. So from there, we see the pair having hamburgers in a junkyard underneath the subway ramp or bridge as they burn something that looks like the items Oz cleaned in the office after doing away with Alberto. And as they eat, Oz complains that his burger doesn't have enough pickles. Now, Victor offers him his. Again, dog, don't kill me, bro. You can have these pickles. But Oz refuses because, Victor's dirty little mouth had already touched him. He then points over to a pile of rims and tells Victor that if he and his friends had just come to the junkyard instead of stealing from him, that he could have saved himself a lot of trouble. He asks Victor if they plan to sell the rims to a scrapyard for extra dough before telling him that he can't afford to think that small, that he should think bigger. He remarks that Victor has no ambition before throwing his hamburger wrapper into the fire and getting up from where he's seated. And this scene, I think, was written simply to further the A story for sure, but also to learn a little more about Victor, that he's just a kid who was displaced by what happened, and now he's trying to figure out what's next for him. That he doesn't really have a plan yet. He's just surviving, only thinking about the very next move. Next, we find the pair in a scrapyard as the sun begins to rise over the city, with Victor dragging Alberto's body in the suit bag behind him. Now, they open the trunk of one of the cars, and together they put the body inside, but before closing the trunk, Oz takes the ring off Alberto's pinky finger. Remember that. At that point, Victor tries to turn and walk away, like, oh, well, okay, good to see you. I'm going to go ahead and holler at you. But Oz stops him, telling him that it's a nice sunrise behind him and that he should check it out. Now, at that point, Victor becomes extremely anxious because, Oz is carrying like a tire iron, so I think he's kind of understanding, like, okay, this is the part of the story where I get hit in the back of the head with this tire iron and then, stuffed in the trunk with this dead body. and he begs Oz not to do it. Oz then reaches inside his jacket pocket and he pulls out the cigar. Remember the significance of the cigar to Oz, right? And so he asks Victor if he's ever had one, and Victor says no. Oz gives it to him and then he lights it for him. And as Victor smokes the cigar anxiously, Oz tells him that the dead body is Alberto Francone, the head of the Francone mob, and that the smartest thing for him to do is to kill him and put him in the trunk with the body. Now, Victor tells him that he can't kill him, that he can help him, that he indeed has ambition, that he isn't just simply a waste, that he just needs a chance. And Oz thinks about it before deciding not to kill the kid, but he tells him that if he steps out of line, that he'll gut him like a fish. He then shuts the trunk and he sits on the back of the car to watch the sun rise in peace. And look, I think here we see Oz realizing that this kid is him, maybe even when he was a kid, feeling like all he wanted is for someone to give him a chance. And that, the kid also has a stutter that I think Oz sees as an impediment the same way Oz's impediment is his foot. And so there's kind of like a kindred spirit between these two, and I think that's what keeps Oz from doing away with him. And so, you look at this and you say, we can look forward to seeing Victor working to prove his worth, as the story moves along, maybe even as the episode moves along. So from there, we see the car parked on the street and the pair enter Oz's apartment. And Victor looks around as Oz tells him that he has to be at work soon and, while he's having a glass of water. And then after that, he goes into the bedroom, shuts the door behind him as Victor looks around and he sees pictures of Oz as a little boy and what might look like his family or siblings or something like that. Now, inside the bedroom, we see Oz preparing to lay down. He takes off his brace and his shoes, and we see that one of his feet is indeed shaped like a flipper, which is no doubt why he walks the way that he walks. And Colin Farrell had to walk down, by the way. The walk was, you got to really commit. He commits throughout the episode to that. But he reaches into his pocket and he takes out Maroni's ring, placing it in a box by his bedside before lying down. Now, we next see Victor driving Oz through town, arriving at a warehouse. The pair walk inside and we see the drug operation in full swing. Now, Oz calls out to Nick, a low-level employee, and he tells him to bring a pen and an envelope. He takes some photos and pages with numbers on them, and he stuffs them into the envelope, and he tells Nick to get the envelope to Councilman Haig. He writes on the front of it, "Let's be pals," and then tells Nick to make sure Haiti knows it's from him. Oz then approaches another man named Dr. DeSoto and asks how things are looking. Now, Dr. DeSoto tells him that they've recovered about 30% of the product and that there's a risk of contamination because most of the drops were fished out of the sewer water. Oz tells him that that won't stop dropheads from buying it, so they should, and I quote, give the people what they want. Now, just then, a group of men walk in with a wounded dealer, and a man named Mikey tells Oz that the dealer was jumped by the Odessa mob, maybe, or Burnley Town, that it happened fast, and that they got the whole stash. Now, Oz laments the state of things as another low-level employee hands him a phone, explaining that it's the family and they want to speak to him. He takes the phone from the employee and he walks away from the other men and Victor as he takes the call. Now, this sequence just gives us a chance to see what Oz does for the Falcone family. He's a manager of sorts. He's in charge of the warehouse where the drugs are being packaged for distribution. We see that everybody there basically reports to him. This is the part of the story's setup. Like if this were a movie script, this would be in part of the setup where they tell you, at home, at work, at play. So we've seen Oz at home, we've seen him at work now, and then we've kind of seen the extracurricular that he got up to, when he was, traipsing through Falcone's office above the club and all that kind of stuff like that. So there's that. And we also get the names of some potential rival gangs in Gotham, people that the Falcone family or Oz individually may have to go up against as he fights for control of Gotham's underworld. And finally, we learn the position that Haiti holds within Gotham's political sphere. He's a councilman. And the sheets with numbers on them in the folder that Oz secured in the office over the Iceberg Lounge were basically pages from books that were being kept laying out his debts to either the Falcone family or maybe even Oz specifically, and this will no doubt be used against him in coming episodes, maybe to get Haiti to do Oz some specific favors as he puts the pieces of his plan into place. So from there, we see Victor driving Oz to see the family. He asks Oz what it means to be called in. He asks if they might know about Alberto. And Oz tells him most of the time the higher ups just want to feel big, so he makes himself feel small in order to placate them so that he can hurry up and get back to work. Now they arrive at the mansion outside the city, and Victor seems impressed. He parks the car, and Oz tells him what he should do if he doesn't come out. But as he sees the look of worry on Victor's face, he tells him that everything's going to be fine before getting out of the car. And he tells him, maybe we need to find your sense of humor someplace. And he enters the house. Now, once inside, we officially meet, Johnny, Carmine Falcone's nephew, and hitman for the family, but he's a higher up in the family. And it kind of feels like he may be in charge for real now that Carmine is gone. But Oz sits with he and Milos explains that they'll be shutting down the plant in Gotham and moving the operation to Robbinsville. Now, Milos explains that there's a lot less heat in Robbinsville. Oz tells Milos that there's a lot less business too. He tells Johnny that he can't just shut the operation down. Johnny then reminds Oz that it's not his operation but theirs, with their guys, and that he simply works for the family. Johnny explains that they lost a lot of product in the flood, but Oz tells Johnny that they recovered 70%. Now, that's not what Dr. DeSoto said. He said 30. Keep that in mind. I don't know if that's a lie or if it's just, that maybe some people know about more than other people know about. But Johnny explains either way that it doesn't matter, that the police are circling, that they have targets on their back, that the gangs are encroaching on their territory. And Oz tells Johnny that, sure, there's blood in the water, that everybody knows it. But he asks Johnny if he's really going to bail. Johnny eventually becomes frustrated as Oz explains that he's handing the Maronis the keys to the kingdom by doing what he's doing. He explains that they look weak if they don't stay put. But Johnny explains that the last thing they need is a gang war. He tells Oz that they only called him in as a courtesy, that Milos is a courteous guy, but that he is not. And he tells Oz to do as he's told before Milos essentially tells him that he's free to leave. Now, Oz asks what if he can fix the issues. He tells Johnny that he has a shipment coming in, that it's big, and it has the potential to revolutionize the drug business. That sound familiar? So Johnny asks what kind of shipment. Oz explains that he can't reveal the details about the product, but that it's brand new, something that will help the family expand, and that they have to do is sit back and reap the rewards. Oz tells him that he'll oversee the whole thing and he'll run it out of the plant. And at that point, we see a female figure approach from behind him, and Milos finally asks Sophia to join the conversation. So Oz turns around and sees Sophia. He stands to greet her, telling her that he thought she was still in Arkham Asylum. She explains that she's been rehabilitated before asking Johnny if he asked Oz about her brother. She asks Oz specifically if he's heard from Alberto, that he went out the night before refusing his bodyguards and that he never came home. Oz tells Johnny that he'll get out of his hair, but asks if they can talk about the operation at another time. Johnny again tells him to shut it down, and Oz agrees. But as he walks out of the room, he tells Sophia that it's good to see her. But now, as he exits the house, Sophia follows him out, claiming that he never answered her question. He then tells her that he hasn't seen Alberto, but that he's sure he's fine. Sophia remarked that Milos and Johnny said the same thing. Sophia stares at Oz in an awkward silence before Oz says goodbye again. But Sophia asks him if the purple Maserati is his. He answers yes. She claims that the car isn't very subtle. Remember that the car isn't very subtle. And that Oz has moved up in the world since her departure. So that means that Oz is probably at a higher station than he was before she went into Arkham's Asylum. That all ties back to Alberto saying that, hey, Oz was skimming, that Carmine knew he was skimming, and that's how Oz can afford, I wouldn't say it's a nice apartment, but an apartment that's probably pretty expensive, and a Maserati, and the nice suits and everything like that. So, she approaches the car noticing the bullet hole in the trunk. Which is, what happened when Oz started shooting at the kids who were trying to steal his rims. And she asks what happened. And Oz tells her that some kids tried to steal his car. He tells her that he missed, but that they got the point. Sophia then tells Oz that they're long overdue for a catch-up, and she invites him to get a bite to eat. So in this group of scenes, we see that the higher-ups in the family don't really mess with Oz like that. They see him as an underling, someone that's completely and utterly beneath them. And you can see the difference in treatment when you see how he treats the people who work under him. He kind of gives them a little more respect. This goes back to the whole wanting to be remembered fondly dream of his that he's espoused to Alberto before he shot him. I think he understands that being treated poorly as an underling is in large part what can make someone want to usurp leadership, which is exactly what he's in the midst of doing in this episode. Now, we also see that Sophia is not buying his bullshit. She is on his ass like 5 minutes to 11, for real. She highly suspects that he did something to his brother and is trying to get him to tell her enough so that she can move on him with a level of certainty. And she's already been in Arkham Asylum, so we can already understand that she's probably crazy as hell. Plus, she's a member of a crime family, so it's absolutely within the realm of plausibility that she could do something to Oz. So the interaction between the two of them is simply foreshadowing. But let's stick a pin in that for now. So next we see the pair eating at a restaurant, and we see Sophia eating like she is fresh out. I mean, like out like last week. I mean, she's eating like someone's going to come by and take the food away from her. And like she hadn't had a good meal in a minute. You know what I mean? She orders more drinks for the two of them before she tells Oz that her dad used to bring her and her brother to this restaurant when they were kids and that he would pay them to keep their elbows off the table. Now, Oz asks Sophia who's stopping her now. So they both put their elbows on the table before Oz notices people staring at them. And Sophia asks Oz if he thinks they know who she is before suddenly reminding Oz that the Gotham Gazette called her the Hangman. She asks Oz if he's nervous. She tells Oz that she doesn't want him to feel nervous with her because she doesn't blame him for what happened to her father. You know, that being him getting shot and killed by the Riddler in the Batman for being a snitch, essentially. She explains that her father is dead and that they are now untamed. She goes on to explain that Alberto told her that he was going to Oz's club and to her father's loft last night, and that though she insisted that she go with him, Alberto refused her in order to keep her safe. She explains that Alberto had a plan and that it was their shared secret. So the plan that Alberto had, his sister knows about it. And this is a surprise, probably, to Oz. And, you know, so that she now hears him pitching that same plan as if it were her own. And as if it was his own, She explains that he would either have to be blindingly stupid to do such a thing or wildly confident that Alberto was gone and that he's never coming back. She then asks Oz again if he knows where her brother is. Now, Oz tells Sophia that he's an asshole, but that Sophia is the surprise in all of this. He explains that he and Alberto had the plan together and that he didn't know that Sophia was involved. He tells Sophia that Alberto is out on another bender, but that the shipment arrives in 3 days. And she looks surprised to see that he knew that, which means she must have known it too. But at that point, Sophia asks what Oz means about Alberto being on a bender. And Oz explains that Alberto is an addict, drugs, alcohol, probably even sex, and that it isn't the first time that he's gone missing, but that he always comes back. He tells Sophia that he was with Eve last night. This is his alibi, but that if Alberto was at the club, he would have known. He then offers to take Sophia to the club to check it out, which Sophia ultimately refuses, but you can tell it's kind of like a chess move, stating that she must just be crazy. The pair toast again as Oz assures Sophia that her brother will indeed turn up. And from there, we see the pair preparing to leave the restaurant, putting on coats and that kind of thing. Sophia hugs and kisses Oz on the cheek before whispering to him that some people underestimate him, but not her. She explains that she's always known that he was capable of more before turning and exiting the restaurant. So in this scene, or scenes, there are two, I suppose. But we learn a few things. One, Sophia, like I said, appears to be fresh out of Arkham, like just got out. Because, like I said, she's eating like a hostage. Also, that Sophia is a little more gutter than her station might make her appear. Like I said, if you take into account that she was in Arkham because she was accused of several murders and dons the moniker, the Hangman, that might be somebody that you might want to keep your eye on. Now, keep that in mind as well. We also see how Oz uses Eve as his alibi, which tells me that this plan of his was hatched on the fly, but that Oz is smart. Maybe not book smart, but definitely street smart, and he's able to kind of see 3 or 4 moves ahead. He knew he would be asked about Alberto eventually, so he had Eve in his pocket to help corroborate the fiction that he needed to get away with Alberto's murder, not in case the cops came sniffing around, but in case he had to convince members of the family that he has no idea where Alberto is. And it's clear that he doesn't yet know how to clear himself entirely of Alberto's murder, especially with Sophia on his ass about it. But he's also simultaneously placing himself closer to this mysterious drug shipment, which I think he sees will elevate him in Gotham's underworld. And right now, Oz is spinning a couple of really, really heavy plates, making it up as he goes along. Now, from there, we see Oz and Victor take the subway someplace. And what's interesting is that while they're on the train, a masked man approaches the pair holding a sheet of paper with a QR code on it, instructing them to scan the code to see Gotham's true face. So if you've seen the Batman, you kind of wonder if maybe the Riddler, I think, knows who Batman is, and he's trying to out him like this. And this might have something to do with where Batman is right now. We saw him ride off kind of into the sunrise, opposite the direction of Catwoman, and we had no idea where he was going. But he's not around, in this episode at least. So, and it appears not going to be around for the remainder of this miniseries. So it's safe to assume that he probably won't show back up until the next Batman movie, where I assume he'll come back. But the pair, Oz tells the man to get away from them in response. And the pair exit the subway and they get into an old Volvo parked in a nearby parking lot. And this time Oz gets in the driver's seat. As he starts the car, 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton plays. And Oz quickly turns off the music, almost like he's embarrassed to hear, to let Victor hear it. And Victor kind of turns his head and quietly chuckles in response. Now he parks the car in front of a row of houses, and the pair gets out as Oz tells Victor that he never brings anybody there. He also reiterates to Victor that if he tells anybody about this place, that he'll gut him like a fish. He takes out the keys and opens the door before turning to Victor once more and reminding him, mind your freaking manners. So we have a pretty good idea that this is Oz's mother's house. Now, the song playing in this group of scenes might seem benign, but I always tell you guys that music is chosen within a story to help set the tone for the story. And at sometimes it can even be an Easter egg of sorts. It can even have some kind of meaning within the story. And 9 to 5 was originally written by Dolly Parton for her movie of the same name. And it quickly became an anthem representing workers subjugated by bosses, though it is particularly aimed at women. But its use here in the show, I think it partly refers to the hard work that Oz has been putting in as a criminal underling to bosses that may or may not see him and what he's capable of. And I also think it represents maybe Oz's newfound plan to maybe not have a boss at all, which is where I think this whole thing is headed. Anyway, once inside the house, Oz goes to greet Frances, his mother, who's sitting at the kitchen table. Now, Victor stands near the door and he looks around and he sees some of the same photos of Oz as a young man and family members that he saw in his apartment, reinforcing the notion that this is a family member of Oz's. And Oz's mother asks, what he's doing there. Oz tells her that he came to see her. He then tells her to close her eyes, and he puts the necklace that Alberto gave him around her neck. His mother claims that the necklace is too much before ultimately deciding to accept the gift. Yeah, too much, not enough for her to not take it, right? She then asks if she should have been expecting him, which tells us that she kind of knows what her son does for a living. Now, Oz tells his mom that it's a special occasion that they're going to be leaving town for a while, which tells us again that Oz is making this all up as he goes, which may be obvious to some of you, but for those of you who might be wondering, it solidifies the idea that his shooting Alberto was a kind of in-the-moment kind of thing and not a part of any initial plan that he might have had. He shot Alberto for making fun of him. That's all. And for those of you that will try to argue with me about this in the comments, you can tell that not only because of this plot point, but also because after he did it, he took a moment to think and he began to curse at the beginning of the episode. So remember that. Anyway, Oz checks the bathroom and he discovers that his mother hasn't been taking her pills. He also tells his mom that the tub is full, and she tells him that the boys were in the bath and that they didn't want to get out, which caused him to look at his mother with concern, like maybe she has some form of like Alzheimer's or something like that that's going on, because maybe she even thinks that her children are still children. And after the awkward silence, he suggests that he gives his mother her meds right then and there, and she reluctantly agrees. And as she stands, She notices Victor and is startled by his presence, and she's like, "Who are you? Get out, get out." Victor tries to mitigate the situation by approaching her and introducing himself, and Oz explains to his mom that Victor is going to help take care of her because he'll need her to handle some things while they're gone. Now, she sarcastically asks if Victor is a nurse, and Oz explains that he has nurse-like qualities. Frances sits again before asking Oz what she did to lose his respect. She explains that she knows that Oz is lying to her about what's going on and blatantly asks him what he did. And after a few moments, Oz reluctantly tells her that he shot and killed Alberto Francone. He explains that Sophia is out of Arkham and that she knows, or that if she doesn't know, that she will soon, and that it's not safe for her at home. Frances then asks Oz why he shot Alberto, and he claims it's because he laughed at him. He goes on to explain that he knows that it was impulsive and stupid. So there you go, in the moment. Frances tells Oz that he sounds weak, like a little P-U-S-S-Y boy. She asks Oz if that's what he is now, and Oz, of course, says no. But Frances doubles down, stating that he's her son, her big, strong bull of a boy, and that he should never forget that. She explains that what he did wasn't impulsive, that instead it was instinctual, that he shot that junkie piss ant because he wanted to, which there's probably some truth to. She also tells him that he's so close to having everything that he wants, but that he shouldn't run and hide. She tells him that the city is meant to be his before asking what he's prepared to do to make it so. And guys, listen, Deidre O'Connell was absolutely brilliant in this scene. She's such a good actress, really. And this was the upturn for Oz. You know, the pep talk he needed in order to see the original plan through the fruition. And I think it was impactful for Victor to see this take place. I think it solidified for him a want instead of just simply a need to be by Oz's side as he goes on this journey. I think he sees the value in it. And from there, we see Oz sitting on the couch playing with his lighter as we see Gilda playing on television. That's an old movie. And we see Rita Hayworth performing Put the Blame on Mame. Now, I mean, Anita Kurt Ellis actually sang the song in this movie. It's her voice we hear, but that's not the point. The point is, Victor asks Oz who Mame is, and Oz responds, "It doesn't matter, kid. She's just a scapegoat." And at that point, we see Oz deep in thought, no doubt coming up with the next piece of the plan. So from there, we see Oz and Victor standing in the parking lot again at Irving Grove Station near the subway, and Oz tells Victor what his part of the next step of the plan is, remarking that it won't be easy. Whatever it is, as you know, we the audience don't know at this point. Victor seems unsure about the plan, and Oz tells Victor that the tenement where he lived is gone, and that nothing in that area was left standing, but that he made it, and that this is one of those moments where he has to ask himself what he wants for himself. He asks him if he can imagine living how the Falcones live. He tells them that the world wasn't built for guys like them, so they have to take what they believe is theirs because no one's going to give it to them without a fight. He reminds Victor that he could have killed him, but that he didn't. And he tells Victor that he needs him, but that he has to now know if he can count on him. And at that point, Victor tells Oz that he can do what he's being asked to do. Oz tells him then to go on, and Victor gets into Volvo. So, this scene was really good, and it just speaks to Colin Farrell's acting prowess. Here, we simply watch Oz do to Victor what his mother just got done doing to him. He basically pep-talked Victor into gangsterdom. But the monologue here was really, really good. Excellent small writing by the writers. Gold star. So next, we see Oz in the visiting area at Blackgate Prison. And none other than Salvatore Maroni enters, making him switch tables. And as the pair finally sit down, Oz tells Maroni that he's done with the Falcones and that he wants to offer his services to him and his family. Now, Maroni seems surprised because he thought that Oz liked eating out of Falcone's, you know what, ASS. Oz seems insulted, but he explains to Maroni that he's not in a position to not hear him out. He describes that the Falcone higher-ups are a bunch of old men who don't remember what it's like to get their hands dirty, and that's why they hire guys like him. And because of that fact, he has access to the ground game, the drops, the dealers, the chemists, everybody. He goes on to tell Maroni that in the next couple of days, the Falcones are expecting him to shut down their operation in Gotham, forfeiting millions of dollars in the process, which means a huge part of their business will be ripe for the taking. He then explains to Maroney that he's in charge of the move. He tells Maroney that he can give him everything that he needs so that his crew can just come in and steal the whole kit, and then they can split the payday. Now, Maroney remarks that Oz makes it sound so simple, but that it would be his guys doing all the heavy lifting. Oz remarks that revenge don't come easy before imploring Maroney to make this move. He brings up the fact that Carmine Falcone was a rat, a plot point from the Batman, and that he played both of them for fools, but that Carmine is dead and that there's an offer. This offer is the opportunity of a lifetime. He tells Maroney that he knows a lot more than people think he does. He explains that he'll keep playing double agent and that the two of them together could tear down the entire empire from the inside out. Now, Maroney asks Oz what he's really after, and Oz seems to be confused by the question. Maroney explains that he knows who Oz is and that he doesn't work with people whose loyalty is for sale. He explains that he remembers all the times that Oz smoozed with him and his guys and then screwed them over in the past, before telling Oz to get the F out. Oz then makes one final plea explaining that whoever owns the drops will own the streets. He tells Maroney that he'll be back in a couple of days and see if they can't work something out. Maroney tells Oz that he never wants to see his smug face again. Oz then gets up from the table, but before he leaves, he takes out the ring that Alberto had on his finger from his pocket and puts it down on the table. Maroney asks him where he got it from. Oz tells him that Carmine wore it as his own and that the Falcones have been flaunting what they did to Maroney for years. Maroney then asks Oz why he has the ring, and Oz simply replies, "Maybe I'm more than what you think." Another great scene between two great actors, and I'll say that, look, all you really need to make great movies and great TV are two good actors sitting across from each other, batting great lines back and forth. That's really all you need. And sometimes I feel like screenwriters try to reinvent the wheel here, so that they can appear to be smarter than everyone who's ever done this before them. And they try to make this thing rocket science when it really, really isn't. But this scene is simply Oz pointing the Falcone and Maroney families at each other in a baddest one hit my hand sort of way. And then he's simply going to move out of the way, or I assume that's what he's going to do, and watch them destroy each other from the sidelines, or he's going to stand on the sidelines for as long as he possibly can, which makes a lot of sense. Again, Oz is smart, maybe not book smart, but definitely street smart, and that's probably going to prove to be more important, as he doesn't really have an army of goons at his disposal like the Falcones and the Maroneys do. Now, from there, we see Oz driving the purple Maserati through town. He's calling Victor, but he gets no answer, which seems to worry him. It's raining outside at this point. He parks outside his apartment, and he sees Sophia and the goon squad standing outside. Now, she sees him because of his conspicuous car. And he speeds away with Sophia and her men giving chase. He eventually encounters a crowd of people at a FEMA location because of the floods and decides to make it look like he got out of the car and decided to lose himself among the large crowd. Now, after the men go and check the vehicle, they walk into the large crowd to look for him. And in a smart move, he gets out of the trunk and he goes to get back into the car and drive away. But as he enters the vehicle, he is set upon by one of the men, and a fight ensues inside the car, one that Oz eventually wins due to his assailant getting run over by a bus of all things. But just then, as Oz stands there looking at the dead body, and the kids on the bus who are staring at him, Castillo, another of Sophia's men, appears out of nowhere and knocks Oz unconscious. Now, from there, Oz awakes to find himself stripped naked and tied to a chair as Sophia calmly berates him, with Castillo torturing him. Sophia talks about the abuse she suffered at Arkham Asylum as Castillo holds the gun in Oz's mouth. Sophia claims that the guards at the prison used to strip her naked every morning, that it was humiliating, being turned into a thing. But that after a while, she wanted to give up while she was incarcerated because she didn't think there was anything left for her. And by that, she means probably after hearing that her father was killed and the family was being fractured. But that her brother visited her every week and assured her that there was still something left for her to fight for and that he was going to help her fight to keep it. She then asks Oz how he sees her, if he thinks she's just a thing to play with. Now, Castillo takes the gun out of Oz's mouth as Sophia tells him that he was right about the club and the loft, So looks like he did a good enough job cleaning up after he did away with Alberto, but neglected to cover up his tracks outside, she claims. She explains that the downside of driving a plum Maserati is that it's conspicuous, as is he, especially when you shoot at a bunch of kids. And at that point, we see that Sophia has kidnapped one of the kids that was trying to steal rims with Victor from Oz, and he's bound and gagged over in the corner of the room. But Oz claims that he doesn't know the kid and that he's lying, and so Sophia kills the kid. Sophia then claims that this is what Oz wanted, to have her reputation precede her. She tells Oz that he's good at talking himself out of things, even at the cost of other people's lives. She then has Castillo cut Oz under the arm with wire, as Sophia explains that Carmine isn't around anymore to reward him with fancy suits and stupid cars, and the club that he lets him believe was his. She explains that Oz that it's just the two of them now, and that she wants him to think really hard. She asks him if she's really crazy, if it's all in her head. She tells Oz to tell her that she's being too emotional and that she shouldn't take things so personally. Then she leans in super duper close to Oz and she asks, but first, tell me my brother's alive. And at that moment, we hear a car outside crash into the fountain outside the Falcone mansion with the horn blaring. And as everyone comes outside to find the driver's side door open with a cinder block sitting on the gas pedal, and the car having been hot-wired, Sophia then goes around and opens the trunk to find Alberto's dead body, his pinky finger missing, and the words payback scratched into the top of the trunk. Now, Sophia screams loudly as Oz, sitting in the chair, still naked, just laughs. And finally, we see Victor and Oz, now dressed, fully clothed, outside of Buddy's, having slush puppies. Oz asks Victor what happened to the original plan, that they decided that the head alone would be good enough, but that he put the whole body in the car with the pinky chopped off. And Victor explains, while trying to stutter, he explains that he wasn't sure how to cut off the head, so he improvised. Oz tells him that it's okay, that Sophia got the message, and that with Salvatore wearing the ring around Blackgate prison again, that the Maronis have no choice but to take credit for the hit. Victor seems surprised that Sal doesn't know what they did, so we can assume that Oz didn't tell Victor that Sal rebuffed his offer at the prison. Oz explains that they just put the Maronis back on the map, and that if Sal doesn't like it, then they don't need him. And he tells Victor that from there on out, they won't be playing it safe, that the drops are yesterday's game. He explains that the plans to get whatever is in this mysterious shipment, that he's going to run the city and that he wants Victor in on it with him. He explains that he's earned the right to be included, telling him that guys like him have to stick together. Remarking to him that the slush puppies are better when you mix the flavors. And from there, we cut to black. So look, when I first caught wind of this series, I wondered what a Batman show without Batman would be like. I was kind of concerned about that because I didn't like Black Panther without Black Panther. But after watching the first episode, I'm extremely optimistic about what this series can be. The pilot sets up a compelling arc for Oswald Cobblepot, Oz in the series, telling the tale of how a low-level henchman in Carmine Falcone's gang becomes a supervillain that we come to know in the Batman franchise, and honestly, I'm here for it. Now, I would give this episode a 90% or a 9.0 if you're thinking IMDb score. I think the story had a nice flow to it. All the scenes felt necessary in the telling of this story, even though the episode ran long. And that's refreshing because a lot of TV episodes are now just kind of filler. And it had a nice flow from beginning to end, and the writing felt extremely conversational but important at the same time. And in fact, that's one of the things I liked the most about the episode. I noticed that we stayed with the main character throughout, which makes me wonder if that will be how this story is told moving forward, kind of completely from Oz's POV. Colin Farrell, I think he carries the pilot with some amazing performances by supporting actors, all pulling their own weight as well. And, Batman is missing here, but at least in the pilot episode, I didn't really notice. And that bodes well for a series that's already 1/8 of the way to the finish line. And I was not sure about this series at first, as I've told you guys, but I am excited to see a show that might actually be good. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this show ends up. But what do you guys think? Did you like the pilot episode of The Penguin? What was your favorite scene in the story? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd really appreciate it. Also, be sure to go and check out themadscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. I'll catch y'all on the next video.